Hey, everybody, welcome back to Morning Sam, Morning Ralph. I'm Paul Molinari, and this is the podcast for restaurant technology professionals. Today, we have an absolute legend in the world of restaurant journalism, someone who has spent over 4 decades telling the stories of this industry with unmatched insight, integrity, and depth. Peter Romeo is a name that carries weight in the food service world. As an award-winning journalist, he's been covering the restaurant industry since the early 80s, shaping the conversation through his work with Nation's Restaurant News, QSR Magazine, and most recently as editor-at-large for Restaurant Business. He's earned multiple Jesse H. Neal Awards, the gold standard in business journalism, and has played a pivotal role in covering the trends, the challenges, and of course, the innovations that define the restaurant space. But Peter isn't just a journalist. If you know him, you know he's a straight shooter. He's someone that operators, executives, and industry leaders trust to cut through the bullshit and tell it like it is. And now, in a new chapter of his career, he's taken on a fresh challenge as managing editor at IFMA, where he'll be leading the content initiatives for one of the most important organizations in food service. So today, we'll talk about that transition. We'll dive into the state of the restaurant industry and get Peter's naturally unfiltered take on where we're headed next. So buckle up. This is going to be a great conversation, kids. This is Morning Sam, Morning Ralph, and Peter Romeo coming up next.
Morning, Ralph. Morning, Sam.
Peter Romeo, welcome so much to the show. I can't even believe you're here. I am so honored.
Paul, I am so honored to be with you. It is just great to make your acquaintance again. You know, we've spent a lot of years together in this industry. Unfortunately, our paths have crossed, and it's always been a wonderful experience. So it's a delight to be here with you.
Well, thank you. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but back in 2013, I believe it's almost it could be 12 years almost to the week. It was like a Murtec show in New Orleans, and I was just, fresh off the off the turnip truck inside of at crunch time, and it really kind of my first experience in hospitality technology. And I didn't know what the hell was going on. And all of a sudden, I look around and I see your name badge, Peter Romeo. I was like, oh, all right, he's an Italian guy. I could talk to this guy. This guy. And so I'm in New Orleans, and I see your name and your badge, and I go, Mr. Romeo, how are you? My name is Paul Molinari, and you're like, oh, who are you at Crunch Time? Oh, are you going to the party? You said, and then you proceed, and it wasn't necessarily like, the Goodfellas scene where, Henry, takes Karen, through the restaurant, but it was kind of close to that. It was such a you were so cool and so gracious and introducing me to people. And I never forgot that. And I just thought that was just, here's a guy. This is just a great guy. So thanks, man.
Oh, hey, I do remember it. And I think what was on my mind was figuring, well, maybe this guy has bail money if we go out afterwards. So, and right back at you, it took a set to do that. Those situations are really intimidating. And you impressed me as a guy who wanted to learn and had his head on straight. And of course, that led to a relationship that we bump into each other now and again. We might have had an adult beverage along the way,
I think so. Yeah,
but it's been a good friendship.
for sure. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you joining me on this 30th episode of Morning Sam, if you can freaking believe it. Well, hey, let's just jump into it, because tell me about IFMA. Now, this is your latest gig. You're the managing editor of content initiatives at IFMA. For the uninitiated, what is IFMA and what's going on there?
So IFMA, that acronym stands for International Food Service Manufacturers Association. And for a lot of years, it was the association for suppliers, for those folks who supplied the restaurants, primarily food, a little bit of technology, but times have changed and the association has changed with it. As of last year, they kind of recast their focus. They went from that sharp focus on the supplier community to looking at the whole food away from home industry. So technically, the name is IFMA, the Food Away from Home Association. So it now serves the interests of not only food suppliers, but a lot of tech people. Tech is just really booming, needless to say, as well as restaurants, on-site food service, C-stores, supermarket food service, the whole gamut. And
Wow.
they fortunately reached out to me. They were looking for someone to be a Paul Revere for their community to alert them in particular to political developments or regulatory developments that affected them because of all the activity in that front. But that sector of the business really was impacted as much as operators were by the pandemic, and is still sort of emerging from that learning experience. And so it's really at a crossroads.
Yeah.
And the thinking was that we needed to foster more of a sense of community to have that portion of the industry foster communication within that sector, but also to bring in the restaurateurs, to bring in the operators. Again, a carryover from the pandemic when those relationships proved so important. I think I'm 3 weeks into it now. They haven't fired me, which is a real good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've survived the hazing, so that's good as well.
You're still in the
Um,
honeymoon phase, though. Come on, let's.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
but it's a new frontier, and for an old dog like me, I started covering the industry in 1979, if you can believe it. So that was back when Tyrannosaurus burgers were a hot menu item. So it's a new adventure, it's a new challenge, and so far I'm really relishing it.
Well, absolutely, that's great. It's also, I think, a tribute to the power of content and writing that can help connect people and these ideas, get these ideas out there. The ability to share knowledge, which is something that you've always been obviously so gracious with. So, Peter, let's get into 2025 now, because as you said, you've been doing this since the 79, the early 80s. You've seen everything come and go. And what is the restaurant industry getting right in 2025 thus far? And where do you see us still struggling?
The pandemic was truly a watershed period. That was the industry's immersion in fire, but it came out of it so much smarter. And certain things that the industry had refused to recognize, it's finally getting its arms around, primarily on the labor front.
Yeah.
The industry discovered very pointedly during the pandemic the wages had to come up. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And we've still got a long way to go. But if you look at wages now and where they were compared to where they were in 2019, we've come a long way. We're starting to get that right. We're also starting to realize that if we want people to regard working in the industry as a career, we got to make it a career. We have to create a path and provide the perks that other industries do that make it worth your while to stick with it. Education is a huge benefit for anyone in that field, given the youth of our workforce. And people are awakening to that. And so you look at it now, it's still the big guys doing it. It hasn't trickled down to that 15 unit operation in the Midwest, but it's coming, paying attention to lifestyles and life needs above and beyond a paycheck.
Right.
So we're starting to get that right for sure. The other thing that the industry discovered is you can't just open it and expect people to come. For the longest time, convenience was a major factor, and it still is today. But you got to do more. There's so many options out there that people realize you have to be something special. You can't be part of that mass, that white noise group that just happens to be there. You've got to differentiate yourselves. Um, the way a lot of parties had tried to do it was with their menu, coming up
Yeah.
with these
Yeah.
unbelievable menus. Now, during the pandemic, that was all pared down, and people realized you just need a few special things that you stand for. And the folks who do that right, Texas Roadhouse, Chili's,
Yeah.
Wingstop, they are really prospering. And they are proof that that less is more approach can really, really be a positive.
Yeah, and it's and what you're saying there isn't necessarily just, menu items either. I mean, this
No.
is like it's standing for something, it's your brand standing for something and sticking by that.
Hmm.
Really understanding your brand's core message and never forgetting.
Oh, for sure. Texas Roadhouse is an amazing story. When people say, "Well, what's so special about it?" There are any number of similar places,
Right.
Logan's. There's a long list, and I always say to them, go to a Texas Roadhouse. Just walk in there and just spend some time. You'll see that's a differentiated experience. The menu is could be anyone's menu, how
Right.
they execute it, how the staff approaches you, sort of
Mhm.
that immersion that's in there. So you're absolutely right. And part of that menu simplification gets back to labor. A lot of operations realize their menus were a nightmare. It was just so stressful.
Yeah.
And fortunately, we've addressed that. We've made the industry a little bit of a better place to work.
Agreed. So how do you feel like technology, and particularly, AI in restaurants, and we're not nobody's really sure exactly how it's all going to play out, but do you think, what's your sense, is AI and technology, is it helping or is it going to hurt restaurants?
Oh, it's definitely going to help restaurants. You and I have been in this business long enough to remember when the whoever was handling IT, they were really more kind of an information technology
Literally
specialist.
an it was an IT team making sure,
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
everybody's email still worked.
Yeah, exactly. And they were tucked in a corner, and you call them when you had some technical problem.
Right.
Now, CEOs have to master technology and keep abreast of what's going on because it's so essential. It is a competitive advantage if used correctly.
Yeah.
Maybe not in the way that people envisioned. The thinking was initially, well, this will replace people, this will replace jobs. That has not been the case. The way technology has come into play is in easing the stress of working in a restaurant, both for the general manager and for people on the lines. That's why
Yep.
we see so much of a focus on the ordering component because that was always the most stressful part of a restaurant.
Right.
And it succeeded in that regard. It is making that much easier. So it's always going to have, or it's going to have a major role. AI is really an interesting phenomenon because initially everyone thought, this is the panacea. This is the great solution. We can put this in lieu of human beings, or it'll just ease the job. It has eased the job, but not necessarily in the ways that had been expected. The
Right.
whole robotics, the whole replacing the human function, it's not been quite as pronounced. It's really been a matter of making us smarter as human beings. So this week, the National Restaurant Association released its winners of their Kitchen Innovation Awards.
Mm.
The equipment, hardcore equipment, ice makers, things like that. So many of those incorporated a touch of AI, whether it was an a tea dispensing system that monitors, that computes what the demand had been, and to make sure that it has enough iced tea being brewed to meet the demand at any time so it doesn't run out. I mean, who would have thought that AI would come into play with
You
drink
know,
dispensers at
Peter,
that level?
that's one of the things that I think is fascinating about, we're so software solution driven, I think, on the technology side. Yet, when it comes to the hardware and specifically the hardware manufacturers that are doing so much of the heavy lifting in terms of actually cooking and producing the food, we haven't heard a tremendous amount from them about what they're doing to improve their machines
Hmm.
effectively. I mean, we all know the Chipotle story with the avocado Terminator, and and Sweet Green's going to bring the spice robots into play and all that good stuff. But what about the tried and true manufacturers, the Bloggets and the rest of the pizza oven companies, and what are they doing to incorporate technology into this? This is going to be fascinating to see how that's going to play out.
Oh, for sure, and I think you're absolutely right. Inertia is a powerful force,
Yeah.
and when you've built up these big companies doing X for decades, it's hard to get away from X and to look at other things. And a lot of the creativity is coming from the bottom up. It's the garage operation that has a better idea that the big guys eventually might copy or buy that operation.
Mm.
But yeah, absolutely. And there were some fascinating applications or fascinating examples of that in those winners. The two that got me, they had two machines that automatically cook eggs. Now we
Okay.
all probably have seen the little things that hard boil eggs. You it's automatic. This one cooked a pair of eggs, sunny side up. You load it with 30 eggs, you press it, it produces sunny side up eggs on a peel away sheet
Oh,
so
wow.
that all you have to do is plate it. Now, I've not seen it. For all I know, it's some Rube Goldberg contraption,
Right, right, right.
but hey, there's something there. The other did scrambled eggs in 15 seconds. All you had to do is press a button.
And it was
So,
smart in that it understood what it had to make. No, okay.
correct,
Wow.
correct. It was a matter of, you set it, you press the button, and the eggs come out. It uses steam, which I don't know how it does it, but point being, those are the guys who are going to prod that old guard to do something. Years ago at a publication I was with, we ran a list that a value-added reseller had produced of the best POS systems, and you looked at that list, and the first 8 or 10 were all the software companies,
Yeah.
and they were just kicking butt. And then you saw this huge gap to the traditional providers. And boy, did we hear a lot of yelping about that. How could we do that? And I wanted to say, don't kill the messenger. You guys have got to, this should be something that rouses you to catch up with the rest of the world in terms of what you can do. So I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. You know, let's shift gears for a second and talk a little bit about consumers. Um, a lot is to be there. There's a lot of pressure on brands nowadays to be as attractive as possible to the Gen Z population. But what have you seen out there that diners are looking for, and how has that changed? You see, maybe over even maybe since the pandemic.
Well, one of the things almost to an operator when I've talked with them about this, they say that the consumer has come out of the pandemic, out of that experience for reasons that they're not really sure of. Uh, More strident, more empowered,
Yeah,
more forceful than ever. Their thinking is, my hard-earned money, I want to make sure I get the best for it.
value.
Yeah, yeah, but and not just value in terms of low price, but what you're getting. One
Right.
of the things that was really surprising to us in watching the pandemic was how well the steakhouse concepts did because they delivered a good experience.
Mm,
So the consumer is indeed becoming that much more demanding in situations where they want convenience. They want convenience times two. But for the most part, they want an experience. Even if it's just a grab and go occasion, they want that experience. They want that to be pleasant.
yeah,
So they're far more demanding in terms of what they want. Uh, they are, by all accounts, more embracing of technology than a lot of operators are. That perhaps they would like to see the industry go a little faster, especially at the ordering stage. We all know the stories that if you order at a kiosk, you tend to order more because there's not a person looking at you or judging you if you get an extra dessert.
that's right.
Uh, so they want that. They want that technology. They want that option. They still want the high touch, but they want that option. uh, I think they're less demanding for variety than they were. They have a few items that they really like, that's their favorites, and they want to find that where they go. So that's why Chili's could put a spotlight on mozzarella sticks and
Right.
really resonate with their clientele.
I love
Um,
what Chili's is doing. I had a conversation with Paul Barron the other day about Chili's and their approach to marketing in
mhm.
general. And if you go to any of the social media pages for Chili's, it's just all, what we call UGC, user generated content. And it's just this never ending parade of eh, people eating at Chili's, posting stuff and sending it to Chili's, and Chili's, distributing it out there. And it's all positive. It's all great. And they've really kind of touched a chord with that. It's an opportunity to be seen
Oh,
in some
absolutely.
ways.
It's amazing. They pretty much uh, Kevin Hochman, their new CEO, a relatively new CEO, he listened to not only the guests but the employees to say, well, what do
Yeah.
people want? What are they looking for? And then they boiled it down. And when you think about it, contrast them with Applebee's, which is not a dissimilar concept
Right.
whatsoever. And they're struggling because they're not sure what they are and what people want. But Chili's, they were masterful in boiling it down, identifying what was what, and then turning a spotlight on those items. The one that got me about Chili's, if you look back, and I was an avid Chili's user, especially when I was on the road, we always kind of check out what's going on.
Yeah.
When they switched from glass mugs to plastic mugs, to me, that was like the beginning of the end.
That was that was the tipping point for you.
Yes, exactly, because there's something more unique about a glass mug, and of course, they have switched back or gone to glasses now for
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
margaritas. So it's a simple thing, but they knew their DNA, and they focused on that, and they found the strength there.
Well,
Uh,
there's the pricing strategy too. We've been hearing a lot about the barbell pricing
mhm.
strategy. Appealing to both value conscious consumers and, still having some, quote unquote premium items, on the menu. And that seems to be working. There's a number of concepts now that, have adopted this barbell and, you know, where they can really, I guess, draw blood from a stone in that, I don't know how they're able to price some of the things that they're able to price, for like 10.99, an entree, a side, and a drink, in a sit down place where you're served. That's hard to do. So they've got to be compensating that with the other side of the barbell.
Oh, for sure. Denny's has entrees or has items starting as low as $2. How the heck can they do something for $2?
Yeah,
But it gets people through the door.
it gets
Yeah,
gets the
that
traffic.
strategy has been proven effective time and time again, and probably never more so than now. Because people do want those value options for sure, but they also want to splurge a little. They also want something a little extra. An affordable luxury is really what it comes down to, and the astute players have figured that out. So yeah, absolutely, and Chili's is a prime example. They found that sweet spot
So
that pulls people in.
so along those lines, I'd love to get your opinion on. I know you're following most of the big brands, of course, and that's always been, I guess, the industry drivers. But Chili's being one, we just talked a little bit about them. But what other concepts would you point to as being real sort of innovators that are starting to get people excited again about eating at a restaurant?
There are a couple that really stand out as the shiniest pennies out there,
Mm,
and that's I shouldn't use that term because it suggests that it's a gloss when really it's solid operations. Kava is one. They have gads of competition, but they stuck to the original sort of proposition for that sector of fresh, ultra fresh
yeah.
uh, 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 variety of salads that were very satisfying for a very acceptable price. and they have stuck to it. Some of their competition have kind of been distracted and gotten away from what they were all about, but
Yeah.
they are there, and their citing strategy is also more astute. Of course, the customer doesn't know that, but the customer loves what they find on the menu. The other one that's a fascinating uh, operation is Dutch Bros.
Yeah.
When everyone else was focusing on get your coffee in a flash, yeah, sure they had drive-throughs, but they'd always say, "How you doing today? What's going on?"
Right.
That little touch, that little human touch, really differentiated themselves.
And that
Uh,
they're still of the styrofoam cup Dutch Bros, right?
yeah,
God
yeah.
bless, God bless their hearts.
Yeah, it's amazing, and the other thing that's really fascinating about Dutch Bros, and certainly figures into their success, is they don't take outside franchisees. If you want to be a franchisee of Dutch Bros, you got to work there, and they only give award franchises to employees, and so they get people who are, no pun intended, steeped in that system,
Yeah.
and they understand what the concept's all about. So there's this kind of they've trained the employees to be franchisees.
It's very
And
organic. It's one of the more organic franchise systems out there for sure. It's a sort of this perpetual growth machine. I mean, you treat your employees well, and it just kind of continues to reverberate
hmm
with opportunity
hmm
down the line. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, especially about kava and the whole and the other ones that are associated with that healthy, healthy eating. I think we've all seen, particularly the younger generation, is I think a lot more conscious about their eating habits and what they want to put into their body. It's everything is seems to have more of a healthy bent. One of the things too, and I remember you calling this out way back. Um, you're going to be like, yeah, of course, well, gluten free. All right. Just the whole gluten free. That feels to me that it has been exponentially important
hmm
to, well, not only, of course, to have like gluten free options, but I think I'd love to get your opinion. Do you think we're going to see a gluten free franchise or a gluten free restaurant concept
Nope,
anytime
I
soon?
don't, because gluten-free is a fascinating development, a phenomenon. We all know the figures that if you look at people who really have celiac disease or
Yeah.
have a gluten intolerance, really a tiny portion of the population. But somewhere along the way, gluten-free was redefined in people's minds as healthful. And
Yeah.
so when they see that gluten-free claim, they think, health. Not necessarily the case.
No.
Yeah, it spares those who have a sensitivity to gluten, but it's not as if it would enhance the health of other people. So college feeders tell me that they would never get away from it because people want to give it a try. The fact it's there, the fact that option is there, says to their clientele, these people care about what I put into my body. It's more wholesome. So I think that it'll always appeal to a larger group than those who have to adhere to a gluten-free diet for health reasons.
Yeah.
But I don't think it could sustain a whole chain or even a whole menu section. You just kind of need it there. The other thing is just operationally to really do gluten-free.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
The
got to really
non-contaminants and, the separate cooking and all of that. Trust me, I mean, this is something that's very close to my, I'm fascinated by it, especially because my youngest son is celiac.
okay.
Uh, and with that comes a whole host of interesting things that, one has to deal with in the house or when going out. But I think the dynamics of it aren't just to the individual, it affects the whole family.
hmm
So the choices that you have to make as a family are influenced by that one person that might be gluten free in your house, which I think has, again, this reverberating effect. I don't know. I would like to see
hmm
a gluten free operation out there as maybe they're not even gluten-free is not in the name, but I don't know. I look
Yeah,
at
yeah.
Sweet Green, that says a positive. Anyway, good. This is good. I think I covered where I wanted to go with some of those trends. I want to talk about, though, some of the challenges, um, because we know that they are many. Um, there are political things that are happening with tariffs, and just an entire host of labor challenges. What do you see as sort of the major challenges we're going to try to have to overcome?
Well, I sincerely believe that this is the toughest challenge for the industry, second only to the pandemic, because in the many, many years that I've covered the industry or read about even the dark ages before that. The reason why our restaurant industry is so ingrained in our culture, is such a part of our social fabric, is that it's a viable alternative to the whole home kitchen. You can
Yeah.
dine out several times a week without really, crashing or really being overburdened,
Right.
and that that's why it coincided with the rise of the two wage earner families. People had enough money but not enough time, so they'd go to restaurants, and that became a really, really a major threat of our culture. Now the industry is being priced out of that everyday dining option.
Yeah.
By necessity, it's becoming a little bit well, a lot more of a special occasion. The prices are just so high that affordability is a challenge despite the value menus, despite all that. A challenge for the consumer to afford, and they see the prices of everything going up. I use myself as an example. Our default option on a day when we wanted dinner but we're too lazy to cook was a pizza, and a pizza with a salad was $21
Yeah.
from my local pizzeria. We had it just 2 nights ago. With tip, it was $40.
For a pizza with a salad.
Yeah, it's just $40 is still not bad, but the shock.
Uh,
So the industry has to find a way around that, and it's not an easy one. Prices have gone up. Food prices, wholesale food prices, are about 40% higher today than they were in February of 2020. Um, so operators feel that they've hit that red line where they can't continue to raise menu prices. It's chasing away customers.
right.
But given that the what's happening with food costs and with labor costs, their margins are just being wiped out. So it's very, very difficult, and it's pushing out sort of a lot of the junk in the market, which is a good thing. Getting rid of some of those old guard brands that our grandparents would eat in.
Right.
But the pricing is still a real challenge. The other thing is labor. The industry really had a come to Jesus moment during the pandemic when they fired their labor staff and then said, "Oh, only kidding. We want you to come back. You're essential workers. In fact, you got to come back." And they came back, and there they were on the front line with cranky consumers and had to worry about their own health, and weren't making that much more than they had before. And
Right.
so we had the great resignation where a significant portion of the industry quit. And now people are that much more skeptical of the industry. So we not only have the issue of paying wages that are competitive with gig society options, but also reassuring workers that we're not an exploitative business, that
Right.
we've realized our crimes. So those are the two big things politically. From what we've seen, the uncertainty that exists politically that might have nothing to do with the industry is definitely chilling dining out behavior. It's almost like you hesitate because this isn't the life you know, and
Right.
it's coming into play. It also is convincing people, if they're going to dine out, to go with a tried and true. So they'll go to Wingstop because they know that they'll get great wings, versus some upstart down the street that also has wings.
Yeah,
So
lots of different things at play there. It's and there's also the uncertainty with the tariffs. I was just at a client meeting last night. A company called Cut and Dry that is an e-commerce platform for service distributors, and they have hundreds. I don't even know. They might have thousands of distributor customers at this point, and these are food service distributors that are importing goods from all over the world.
mhm.
Like German jellies,
Oh yeah.
and Japanese fish and all of these different things. And so the tariffs just have this, it's been really complicated and difficult for distributors to plan and it's such a cutthroat business to begin with. Yeah, there's a lot of things that are a little unclear.
So one quick thing
Yeah.
on tariff. So our convention is called COEX, for Chain Operators Exchange, and we just had it in Kansas City 2 weeks ago. Excuse me. So when Trump announced he was imposing the tariffs, we were there,
Mm,
and it just hijacked the conversations, at coffee breaks and all that type of thing, because no one was sure what was going to happen. And that whipsawing back and forth, they're on, they're off. And then just the scale of them is just astounding. I wrote a story a few months ago about how wine prices had changed when 25% tariffs were imposed during the first Trump administration, and a $20 bottle of wine jumped to $28.
yeah.
So, and now we're talking 250% tariff. So it's going to be an incredible thing, and everyone is affected. Everyone, the restaurant industry is affected on the cost side,
Yeah.
but also on the sales side, because consumers are going to have less disposable income. It's a major thing. It's a major trial for the business.
It certainly is. Let's talk about the reporting of that. You're a journalist, um, and I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions. And just to remind the audience, the man that I'm interviewing here has been an editor at Nation's Restaurant News, QSR Magazine, Restaurant Business. I mean, basically the big three, the trifecta, if you will. And um, Peter, how has trade journalism, food food industry trade journalism changed over the past couple of years in particular? I have an opinion about this, but I'd love to hear what you think, and maybe we can compare and contrast.
It's a whole different world. When I started out back in the dark ages, there were so many publications. We actually had regional publications. There was a publication before your time
Yep.
just for independent operators in the Midwest.
Wow.
And we had four major publications: R&I, Restaurant Business, Restaurant Hospitality, and Nation's Restaurant News. And we were cutthroat. I mean, we were really going for blood in
Yeah.
our competition. And that drove us to do a really, I thought, a very, very good job of covering the industry. We each had our own little niches. Well, now that's been boiled down to one provider,
Mm,
Informa. And that was my former employer, and I have no ill will toward them, and still have a lot of pride in restaurant business. But restaurant business, restaurant hospitality, and Nation's Restaurant News are all owned by the same company. And if I were looking at this situation, if I were writing about this situation, that's what I'd zero in on. Are we going to get the same breadth of coverage that we once did? The other thing is how that coverage comes about. We used to really delve deeply into these issues because, going back to when I started, there was no internet. And the only information you were going to get was from the trades. So
yeah.
you had to make sure you really had the full story when you delved out, when you delivered that stuff. Now, I
It's
used
so
to,
fast. It's
I,
just so fast.
my quote at Nation's Restaurant News when we went weekly was one story a week. Now I average two a day. Um,
Wow.
uh, it's very much a matter of, here's what's going on to the next one. Here's what's going on. You can stop at times and delve into it, but there's not the depth that there was.
Yeah.
And the other big thing is that everything back then was print. Video is a marvelous way for imparting information for sure, but it's hard to really get a lot of depth into those reports. A lot of those are just kind of top line reports, but that video is a huge, huge, huge part of reporting now by the trades for sure. So, but I'd love to hear your theory.
Well, I think you actually touched on a bunch of it, just with regard to the speed and the. I mean, here's the thing: the industry is blessed to have a bunch of really, really talented people that are covering it and writing and talking about it and recording themselves, and in a lot of ways, becoming their own celebrity, in their fields,
Sure.
which is kind of what you have to do. It's as a I don't know, an old school kind of guy that loves, real journalism. I get frustrated by the lack of depth that a lot of it has and the shortness to it. Never mind the fact that it's all coming from the same corporate umbrella. Um, so I fear that the smaller, I mean, 'cause in my world, particularly in the restaurant technology world, where things are happening at the speed of sound with regard to innovation and new things that are coming out, um, there's a tremendous amount that doesn't even get an opportunity to go into the filter for analysis. So it just feels very short and very fast.
Hmm.
And with this idea of their stories that just have to appeal to the most people at any given moment.
Hmm.
So with that in mind, I do think that there is an opportunity for a deeper dive. And so a couple of months ago or whatever, when we reconnected, and I was like, oh, Peter, man, you got to do like a Substack or something. I mean, there's great people out there, real true journalists that go into a topic and explore it and look at it from
Hmm.
different facets and different angles, and it's worthwhile, and I
Hmm.
hope you do it. I'm just
Well,
saying, I have
yeah.
two predictions for you. You're gonna, by the end of this year, you'll have a Substack, because you won't be able to help yourself. You'll have a Substack, because you get a lot of money doing it, because you need to have one.
Well, thank you, and I don't think your predictions are going out on a limb whatsoever. In particular, one of the challenges for those journalists who, business to business journalists, is covering technology. We can go into a restaurant and try a new item and take a look and sort of analyze, given our knowledge of how it came about, what effect it might have had on kitchen operations. Technology is a whole different thing. And so it's hard to get our arms around that. And yet there's so much bluster. There's so much BS that's peddled out there about this is going to be the next game changer, that type of
Yeah,
thing.
sure.
It's really, really hard to cover, and yet the operator really needs guidance in that regard. So kudos to you for doing this podcast because I think it makes people think.
Well, thank you, sir. Well, so what's your advice for industry leaders that want to stay informed? What do they do? What should they do?
They should first and foremost talk to their employees. Um, eh, eh, their employees can tell them what's really going on, where the rubber hits the road. So if they're thinking of a piece of technology, it's not such a leap to say, well, this is what this would do. So to talk with their employees, make sure that it's an organic thing, it sort of fits. But then, most important, and this astonishes
Mm.
me that there's not more of this, to talk to their peers, to talk to the users. And if a piece of equipment doesn't have, or a piece of technology doesn't have users yet, maybe let someone else be that first surfacing whale, which is, of course, the one that gets the harpoon.
Yeah.
Um, and to make sure that for those users. It did what it was supposed to do. The return was there. What happened after they signed the contract? When the supplier had the money, when it had their check, were there any extraordinary circumstances? What was the follow up like? Was it a relationship, or were you buying a car
Yeah.
where once you drove it off the lot, that's it? See ya.
Right.
And at the at the same time, talk to their peers all the time about what they see is what's happening next, because there's just, I mean, who would have thought that we'd have an automatic sunny side up egg cooker? uh,
Who'd have thunk it? I mean, really,
yeah, yeah,
we're blessed with
yeah,
such
yeah.
machinery. All right, I got four quick questions for you. We're gonna wrap it up with four quick questions of the lightning round for Mr. Peter Romeo.
Okay.
As quickly as you can, the biggest industry myth that needs debunking.
That this is a dead end industry. I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of speaking to our industry, and I look out at the audience and I see millionaire after millionaire after millionaire. And by their own accounts, these are people who basically it was they got lucky, otherwise they would have ended up in the military or jail. There is opportunity. Tend to have a lot of mavericks who don't follow the traditional path, but they get there in the end. There is tremendous opportunity in our field.
Love it. One restaurant trend you think that is overhyped?
I think that the this wave of gourmet cookies. We went through this before. How often are you going to buy a cookie? And even if they cost $5 each, I don't know. The longevity is just a real challenge, and those operations are really not moated. You know, you
Yeah.
could get into that field. We saw this with frozen yogurt twice. We saw it with so many other products where you can knock it off and add it to your operation. You don't have to invest everything to sell
All right,
cookies.
just real quick on the cookie thing. How the
Okay.
hell can they sell those cookies with no coffee?
I don't know why they'd ever want to.
I I
You know,
I
it's mind-boggling. If you go back to Krispy Kreme and their first kind of, you know, they had some struggles early on. It was because the profitability of donuts was not what coffee is. Coffee is where you make your money. And
blows
why
my
not
mind.
do that? So
All right, favorite meal you've had since January?
As I mentioned, we had our big conference in Kansas City, and of course, we had to have Kansas City barbecue. And so, sure enough, we went out and indulged, and we had burnt ends, which are a Kansas City specialty. You could build a vacation around around burnt ends.
I
I
can
mean,
build a
really,
house of burnt
it
ends.
was just so delicious and just so unique. You know, for those who might not know, they're kind of the trim, and you just burn the hell out of them, so they got a nice charred taste to them.
Yeah,
But they're nice and chewy and just
that's
delicious.
the best part of
Um,
barbecue, man.
so I salute a restaurant called Jack Stack in KC for giving me a delightful meal.
Beautiful. All right, last question in lightning round. If you can open one restaurant tomorrow, what kind would it be?
Well, you know, I've given this a lot of thought. First of all, hopefully, I'd be smart enough to realize better to write about restaurants than to try to operate them. Tough business. But I think if I were to do something, I would give another try to things that was tried many, many years ago of basically having meals to go ready for commuters when they get off their train,
I
where you
remember
could put,
doing that in Manhattan, coming off the train and grabbing, they'd have tubs of beer, and you just
yeah, yeah,
I grab
exactly,
my
exactly.
Coors Light and jump on the train, go home.
Exactly. So imagine when you got to your station, if waiting for you in a little cubby was
Oh,
a bag with your dinner, and either you had to do minimal preparation or it was ready to eat or whatever. There's a lot of logistical issues, but I think there's something there.
I I agree with you. I think that that would be one hell of a great innovation. I mean, we've got locking lockers that keep food warm.
Mhm.
Why not?
Yeah.
All right. Uh, hey man, what can I say? This has been awesome. I mean, this has been great. You've made my 30th episode dreams come true, Peter. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can they read your stuff?
Our website right now, the URL is IFMA World. That's IFMA World.com. Under the news tab, you'll find the stories. And I am very mindful of what we talked about in terms of adding another voice to the voices that are out there to provide more of that sort of analysis. So please do go there. We have a newsletter. It's currently monthly. We're probably going to step that up, called Pulse.
Great.
But please reach out to me, and you'll find my contact information there. Would love to hear from the operators.
Fantastic.
And thank you, Paul, for this opportunity to speak with you. It was a real delight.
Well, yeah, it was for me to speak with you, and I will make sure that I put those links in the show notes. And listen, buddy, this has been great. I hope to see you somewhere along the circuit sometime this year. And if not, we'll be watching the Yankees anyway.
For sure, this could be a tough season, and we're not going to bring up that team up in Boston.
No, no,
But and next time, if
you
you
don't
have me
need to.
back, Paul, I promise you, I'll bring coffee and cookies.
Oh, good, good. I'm going to hold you that. All right, Mr. Romeo. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
Enjoy. Ciao.